Hello and welcome back to the One Shot Show, where GMs go to level up. Our episodes are only 15 minutes long, and yet I could not put aside 15 minutes this week to write more opening zingers. My name is Matt.
My name is Mark.
And we're joined once again by award-winning DM Brad Thompson. We're going to trot out that award-winning every single time.
This is the Dungeon Master Challenge 2021, run by Wizards of the Coast, the official publisher of Dungeons & Dragons.
Wow, that's the first time we've ever mentioned that.
Yeah.
That so seldom comes up with this guy around. But today we're not talking about GMing or the fact that you may be an award-winning one. Today we're actually talking about how to be a great player. And I actually think as GMs, we've got an opinion about what makes a great player for sure. I'm also curious to see if those opinions are things we actually end up embodying when we are at other people's tables.
And before we get into that, how much do you play versus GMing at the moment?
I actually play more than I GM at the moment. I'm very fortunate.
Envious.
I know.
Are you also an award-winning player?
Award-winning player. I don't know if there's actually a competition for that. If there was one, I would be yes.
No, I have absolutely no doubt. What about you, Matt?
Am I an award-winning player?
Do you play very much, or do you GM more?
I GM way more than I play. Like it's like a 10-to-1, 20-to-1 ratio. It's pretty rough. Yeah. What it is I GM on the reg, and every so often, one of my players or someone I know will be like, "Hey, I'm starting up this campaign." I'll be like, "Finally, I can play." It'll run for 5 sessions, and then it'll fizzle out. And that happens maybe once a year.
Wow, I run about 10 campaigns a week, and the last time I played was actually in your game,
Wow.
which was last year.
Yeah.
So, important question: was he any good as a player?
Well, what's the...
Because if he's not a subject matter expert,
what's the
if he
maturity
wasn't
rating
a
of
good
this
player,
podcast? I feel like there's quite a few zingers in that.
So, for context here, I think this is a really good example of the player suggesting things and trying to work with the GM, and the GM being like, "We can take it so far, and then we'll have to cut it off at a certain point."
Yes.
This was a level 21 shot. We were trying out the brand new 2024 rules for D&D 5e, and I wanted to bring a bard. And not just any bard, a bard who came from a family of bakers. The Doe family, a humble family. And the way that Ewan...
I'm waiting for the pun.
The way, you know me very well, the way that Ewan would give out inspiration is by handing out his long, hard French stick, or maybe letting you taste his hot, steaming buns. You could always count on Ewan Doe. And Brad, you did not allow me to bring my hand-sculpted mini that was definitely a tall, rigid chef's hat and not anything else. You drew the line there.
No phallic symbols. Yeah, I drew a line at phallic symbols.
And that, for our audience, is an example of players and GMs kind of meeting. I have an idea. You like, I like it. Let's make some compromises. And I'm like, okay, I'll leave the penis at home.
Yeah.
I want to crack into a couple of basics. So first,
You can watch that game back, by the way.
yeah.
On my YouTube channel, Cutting Words.
Yeah, shout out to Cutting Words.
Cutting
Like and
Words.
subscribe.
Yeah.
After you've liked and subscribed to the One Shot Show, of course. So
Well,
rule
ours
one-
isn't run by an award-winning DM.
No, it's not. What are we doing here? Rule number 1, leave the penis at home. Rule number 2, let's get into some of the this is like your first couple of times playing D&D. You've been invited to a game where your friends got one together. You're really excited. What are the absolute fundamentals that is going to make your GM instantly love you? That's going to make their job as easy as it possibly can be. What are some of the basics?
I mean, the absolute basics are show up on time, listen, put your phone down, be engaged. Buy into the game. And I've talked about this, I think, every single episode, that players should buy into whatever story the GM is trying to share.
That's because we're hacks. We only actually have 1 point, and it's players should buy into whatever's going on.
In your award-winning GM opinion, is that a hack suggestion, or is that a good suggestion?
That's good. Yeah, read the briefing. GM's briefing for you. This is the setting. We got into the kind of vibe of game I want to run. Buy into that. Don't go, that's nice. I actually want to write a character that's completely different to that to what you want to run, and do this other thing. It's like, hold on, no.
What are some advanced tips that someone who has shown up to these games, you've been playing a little while, you kind of know the rules, how can you make the game really work for the other players, and how can you make that game really work for the GM?
So keep the penis in your pocket in case it turns out the table would be cool with it.
Yes,
don't
very important.
count yourself out.
Very important to talk about lines and veils, safety tools. That can be a whole own discussion.
Big time.
Yeah, Session 0 is a whole thing on that.
Absolutely. Session 0, we'll talk about that later, but also being considerate of the other people. at the table, and don't be edgy. Don't like push anything that anybody else is uncomfortable with.
I've got a couple of ones here actually that I would say are slightly more advanced tips that I really try and encourage my players to undertake. So one of the first ones is, if at all possible, resolve conflicts in character, even if they might feel off the cuff like out of table conflicts, right? An example of this, I've had instances where I've had a player has a very heavy talking, proactive kind of character because he is quite a proactive player. He engages a lot, which for me, I love. It's great. But I had another player go, I feel quite sidelined because I feel like he will always jump in and start talking before anyone else gets a chance. And I'm like, totally hear you. And I could just approach him, in person and say, hey, mate, give everyone else a little bit more talking space. And he would definitely go, oh, sorry, didn't realize it was becoming a problem. But he was also playing the character really well by doing that. And here were these other characters that weren't as proactive. So I actually encouraged the player with the gripe to try and be more proactive with their character. This became character development for them as they became a more proactive, more confident character in the context of the game, and it solved our meta issue.
Okay, so I've got a very strong opinion on this.
Oh.
One, you're going into a completely different territory of solving out of character conflict. And two, I strongly disagree. That depends on the people. And it is totally okay to say to a player, you're taking up the spotlight a lot, give somebody else a turn.
Oh, for sure. I do that, by the way. I did that in the context of these being people who I have known personally for a long number of years. I've run games for plenty of times, multiple with these two players, both together and separately. There was a lot of pre-existing trust that made that possible.
Okay. Brad, you were saying that you play way more than you GM.
Yes.
What do you try to actively do to make your games better as a player?
Ooh. Well, where to begin? Character backstory writing, would say. I love running a good character with a lot of well, sorry, not good necessarily, but there's quotation marks there for the podcast listeners there.
For those of you listening who cannot see the video, which you can check out on Patreon, Brad did indeed do the quotation marks action. Yeah, go on.
So a character that's tied into the setting. So I like writing a complex character with but hooks going on, good hooks. So it's quite it's an interesting technique. Not everyone's good at, start out of the gate to write hooks that are actually useful for a GM to go, actually, I can do
something
with this.
That I really enjoyed is when we were players in a game together for a live show, and we wrote our kind of backstories entwined together. What was it? We were in prison together? We were prison buddies?
Yeah, because I was a big barbarian, you're like a little gnome guy.
That's right, and we kind of worked together into our backstories to work out that, because I was a little gnome, you were some very tall human, and we worked out that you had like a baby carrier on your front. And anytime, we were always the first two into the room.
Yeah.
You would kick down, you would kick down the door, and we would shout out whatever the party slogan was together. And I found that really beautiful with players cooperating with other players on backstories.
Yeah, backstory connections is very good, as well as shared secrets and that sort of thing can slowly reveal to the rest of the group.
Because that really encourages players intertwining their characters and really working together so that it's not like a show where every person has to always have their own individual moment. You can support your friends, and I think it's a really wonderful thing to do as a player. Like sometimes sit at the back, hand out some inspiration, or carry around the gnome in his little baby carrier and just open the door for him occasionally.
Some of that, especially what you were talking about with laying in hooks for the GM to pick up on, I actually think another piece of advanced players' advice is trust me. For goodness sake, trust me, right? If you put that in there, if we've discussed it, trust that I'm doing something with it. We might not have got there yet, right? I might have only done some little things. It might go in a direction you didn't expect, but please trust me, right? A classic example I had a player who showed up to a fresh campaign believing it was going to be a real sort of, head out into the frontiers, a lot of time in the wilderness, a lot of time in unknown areas, and it was very much going to be that, but a lot of the first bit of it didn't do as much of that as he had expected. And he reached a point where he went, I've made this character that should be really good at these things, and then we're not actually doing them. And I went, trust me, those things are coming. Now, he didn't trust me. He changed his character, and I said, I'm not going to stop you. If you're not having fun, you should change character. It would be wrong of me to force otherwise. But if you can trust me and go along with it a little bit further, he went, no, I want to change character. So he came back to the next session with a new character that was very good at, negotiating and political intrigue and all the talky stuff that we seemed like we'd been doing a whole lot of. And then one session later, they're off into the wilderness. And now he's got, a talky, investigatory, spy type character whose skill set is halfway useless now that we're out in the middle of nowhere, right? And he got really frustrated by that. And then, as that particular arc of the story was just about coming to a close, he did the same thing. He went, I've had enough of this. Can I switch back to the previous character? And I went, I'm not going to stop you if you're not having fun, but if you're willing to trust me. And again, he was not willing to trust me. He changed the characters. This happened about 3 or 4 times until he eventually dropped out of the campaign,
I will say that you don't always have the privilege of being able to trust a GM. If you're just meeting somebody for the first time, if you're sitting down for a one-shot, or you're meeting somebody brand new at your local game store, and something that player has done that I really like is let you know when they're not having fun.
We did discuss it, and we worked out a solution. And also because I knew that he was wanting to change this character, I sort of went, all right, the least I can do is try and introduce whatever bits of political intrigue stuff
I like that as well.
In the wilderness.
Being able to talk to your GM and being able to share with your GM, because I have had players who didn't. I have had players who have kept their plans and their gripes secret. I love running a very improv and role-play heavy campaign, and I had 2 paying players who wanted nothing more than to play D&D as a war game, and they didn't tell me. And they stuck around in the campaign for weeks and weeks and weeks. When I was always very clear and I was always very transparent with what the game was. And then eventually they dropped out and they told me it was because there wasn't enough fighting. But there was absolutely nothing that I, as a GM, could possibly have done if they didn't talk to me.
In a similar vein, and I'm keen to get your thoughts on this as well, assuming you have some.
He's award-winning.
Yeah. I like to think you have thoughts in general. In a similar vein is, there's also communicating with the GM about, stuff that's like in your backstory, stuff that you have laid in there, people you may know, character interactions, things like that. Because if you at the back of your mind have this thing with your character where you're like, I'm going to eventually, I'm playing a wizard who's eventually going to get seduced and enticed by the dark arts of eternal life, and I am going to, once we hit higher levels, want to start pursuing lichdom. If you don't tell me, what am I supposed to do? And then I'll never be able to help deliver it for you. And then you're sat there, crossed arms, huffing, going, well, how am I supposed to become a lich in this place, right? And I've had players start to fall into that trap until I sat them down and talked to them about it. And they said, I wanted it to be a surprise for the table when I suddenly started pursuing these dark arts. So that's why I didn't want to tell you. And I sort of went, I get where you're coming from.
Do not keep secrets from your GM.
Now I can actually work with you to make sure that's a surprise. We can have it be subtle. We can have it be quiet. I can ask everyone else to leave the table while we handle the scenes where you're delving into libraries and archives, right? You can do all of that, but just tell me. It doesn't have to be a secret to me.
It's a shared storytelling experience. We're all here to help tell a story, and the GM needs to know these things to help your story come to fruition.
It's a shared storytelling experience, but not of equal parts.
Yeah.
The GM is fulfilling a very different function in
Running
that
the
shared
world
storytelling
for you.
than the players are.
Yeah.
So let me work with you to both deliver your story and to make it satisfying for the rest of the table.
Matt, I can talk about this because I have had the very rare privilege of working with a GM to have one of my high-level characters actually achieve lichdom and surprise the party with it.
Really?
And let me tell you that working with somebody, working in cahoots with a GM who is also conniving away alongside you in the background to deliver a surprise like that to a group of your friends, it's delicious.
You mentioned in one thing there, surprises. Now, I do love a surprise that hits the whole table because you've worked with a player. If there's another piece of advanced advice I can give, it kind of ties in a little bit to that idea of trust, is roll with the punches, man. And I do lay this up with my players ahead of time. I go, look, how much are you willing to let me just take what you've put in your backstory and run with it? And be honest, because I don't want to throw big twists at you that you're not going to be okay with. An example of this recently. A player has joined the party because party's previous actions, he's joined partway through the campaign. Party's previous actions have caused a blight to be introduced to his home forest. he wants to work with them so that they can take down the person who introduced the blight, right? And we're finally back in the part of the world where it's looking like that's going to be a possibility. They show up nearby. Next village over is like, oh, yeah, no, that forest, we burned it down a couple of weeks ago to control the blight. Now, there's more to come. That's not the end of that story. That's not the end of his story. That's not the end of what's going on there. I won't say too much because this is where we are at the campaign
Spoilers.
now. Yeah. But he knows that there's more to come. But he did have to, in that moment, at the table, as soon as I delivered that line, he suddenly had to adjust around what he thought was going to happen to this new reality. Now, I'm not going to do that to a player that's not going to feel comfortable with that. I don't want to throw those curveballs, but if you'll let me, then I will deliver you some really good shit.
Really good person to talk to about this because you do a lot of live action roleplay.
Yeah.
And from what I can tell, LARPing is basically inflicting consensual trauma upon your players for weekends
over and over
at a
again.
time.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about consensual trauma and LARP to round this off?
Oh, wow. Let's dive into my whole other hobby.
Or is that going to be a whole other episode?
It's pretty big. Where, for those who don't know what LARP is, it's basically, think tabletop games, but get rid of the table and you dress you up and you're the character now running around.
LARP stands for live action roleplay, just by the way. It's not like a weird 1950s, freeze-dried food product. It's always what LARP kind of sounded like to me.
Yeah, so that's where I started LARPing, and then I went D&D and tabletop games afterwards, which is the other way around. So that's why this tabletop stuff easy. It's so easy. It's like, that's how I became Water Dungeon Master because
But because LARP, you're very physically present.
Yes.
It's a lot more role play and there's a lot more investment and trust in the GMs.
Yes.
I mean, we talk about rolling with the punches as well. To my understanding, in LARP, sometimes that is quite literal.
Yeah, I think a really good, maybe final piece of really good advice is to allow your character to fail. And as the player, you are watching either a comedy or a tragedy, depending on how you feel about that. I've had many characters die in really hilarious ways. Do we want to share ways that our characters have suffered horribly, just as a quick little anecdote?
Oh, I had a player commit suicide to frame somebody else for their murder.
That is
It's hilarious.
And it was a romp, but what a comedy.
I had a player die. He was a pirate captain.
I hope you mean the character.
Yes. I had a character I was playing die who was a pirate captain who accepted the role as the head of the navy of a landlocked country as an assassination attempt. And as the player, I could see it coming a mile away, but I'm like, this guy's dumb enough to walk directly into this trap. And he was murdered. Brad, do you have a character you've played that's died in a horrible way?
You'll go for my LARP characters. So all my early LARP characters, I wanted to play like a Littlefinger kind of character, so evil schemer. And I was invited to a private scene with a bunch of other players for some secret mission. Oh, great. I was very excited. Yes, I can form my evil schemes. And suddenly I hear one of the players go, now! And all the players turned with their swords, felt like Caesar. Stab. It's like, I was so shocked. I was so surprised. I didn't see it coming. And didn't even cast a monologue.
That is glorious.
I love that because, I mean, you had to absolutely be the butt of that. Yeah. But how cool was that? All of us just now were like, man, that sounds awesome. I can totally picture that.
And I think that's a really good place to end it because not only is that you having that dissociation from the character you're playing to really enjoy being killed in a horrible way, but it sounds like everybody had complete buy-in to the story that was being told. All the players were working together.
Huge conspiracy to kill me,
Huge.
I think that's fantastic.
Absolutely solid stuff. Thanks once again to Brad for joining us. People can find you at Cutting Words, and I'm sure you'll be back on here before too long. This has been the One Shot Show where GMs go to level up. I hope that's been helpful, and we'll see you in the next one. If you like what you just heard, feel free to support us on Patreon. Every little bit helps. Go to patreon.com/OneShotShow.